My name is Marielis. I'm 45 years old, and I just moved back into my mother's house with nothing but a suitcase and the kind of silence that fills your lungs when you've cried out every word you had. I used to have a life people envied, or at least that's what I told myself. A husband who smiled at the right moments, a daughter who hugged me in public, a best friend who showed up with wine and gossip. It all looked perfect until the bottom fell out. Until they did what I never thought they'd do. They left me. One by one, like my pain made them uncomfortable, like my failure was contagious. The day I came home, Mama didn't say much, just opened the door, stepped aside, and said, "You hungry?" That was her way of loving me. Quiet, no questions. But her eyes, they searched me like she was counting all the pieces left. You ever stand in a room that once held all your childhood dreams and suddenly feel like a stranger to your own history? That's what it felt like to be back. That smell of lemon oil on old furniture, the creak in the third floorboard, the same chipped teacup on the windowsill. Everything was frozen in time, except me. I had no money, no job, no friends left. My daughter wouldn't speak to me. My ex-husband, he told people I couldn't keep it together. And my best friend, Reba, the one who swore she had my back, she was the first to turn her face away when I fell. I wasn't just broken, I was invisible. But I'll tell you something I didn't know then. Rock bottom has a clarity to it. You stop pretending. You stop reaching for people who let go of you a long time ago. And you start looking inward, where the real fight is. This is the story of how I came home, humiliated, but found something worth more than their approval. This is the story of my quiet revenge, my rebirth. I don't need them to say sorry. I don't need them to see me, because this time I see myself. I didn't even pack a real bag, just a beat-up suitcase with one zipper that's stuck, stuffed with clothes that didn't quite fit anymore. Old blouses that used to mean something, a pair of shoes that looked too expensive for the life I was walking into, and a folded envelope with the last of my pride, my divorce papers, unopened. The sidewalk leading up to my mother's porch hadn't changed, cracked in the same places, weeds still fighting through the concrete. I could have walked it blindfolded. My feet knew the way. But I hesitated at the bottom step. This was the same porch I'd sat on with my daughter, Braylon, braiding her hair while cicadas sang in the trees. The same one where I'd laughed late into the night with Reba when life felt big and open. Now it felt like the doorstep of my own failure. Mama opened the door before I knocked, like she'd been watching from behind the curtain like she always did. "Mari," she said, like she was testing the name in her mouth. I hadn't heard her say it in months, not since the last phone call where I told her everything, or maybe not everything, just enough for her to know I had nothing left. Her gray hair was tied back, her frame thinner than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp as ever, deep brown like mine, like Braylon's. "I don't want to be a burden," I said. "You hungry?" she asked again. That was all. No lectures, no questions. Just an invitation into the silence. I stepped inside, and every part of me wanted to exhale, but I held it in. Because letting go, even for a second, felt dangerous. Like if I really let the grief come out, it would drown us both right there in her living room. The house smelled like ivory soap and wood polish, a scent you couldn't bottle. It was the smell of every Sunday growing up, of hot combs sizzling on the stove, of gospel humming from the kitchen, of hands that had worked too hard and still made space to love. I dropped the suitcase by the couch and sat down. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was familiar. A kind of pause that said, "I see you, I know you're hurting, but I won't press." Mama brought me a plate. Fried chicken, collards, cornbread, still warm. I hadn't eaten real food in 3 days, but I just stared at it for a while, tears burning in the back of my throat. I finally picked up the fork and said, "Thank you." She sat across from me, knitting like she always did, eyes low but attention full. "Room's still the same," she said. "Sheets might be dusty." That room. I hadn't slept in that room since the night I left at 19, belly full with Braylin, suitcase full of dreams. I'd left thinking I'd never need to come back, that leaving meant winning, that my life would be different from hers. But now here I was, 45, divorced, abandoned, and sitting in the house I swore I'd never return to. I walked upstairs after dinner, creaking each step, as if the house wanted to remind me it remembered me too. The door to my room stuck a little, paint peeling at the corners, same posters on the wall faded, same little dresser I used to write my name on with lipstick. It smelled like the past, like lavender, dust, and shame. I sat on the bed, hands in my lap. I was still for a long time, listening. Somewhere in the house, Mama was humming. Maybe it was a gospel song, maybe just a tune her spirit knew. It didn't matter. It wrapped around me like a blanket. I hadn't prayed in months, maybe years. But that night, lying on that old bed with my suitcase unopened at my feet, I said one word: help. Not to anyone in particular, just out loud, into the darkness, into the ceiling, into myself. And then I slept. For the first time in weeks. I hadn't seen Braylin in 6 months. Not since the courthouse. Not since she crossed her arms over her chest and said, "You did this to yourself, Ma?" I'd replayed those words every night since. Not because they hurt, though they did, but because of how cold her eyes were when she said them. She was my baby, my only child. I used to rock her to sleep with Al Green playing low on the stereo. I used to whisper in her ear, "You're loved, you're enough." But I guess none of that sticks when people only remember the fall. She came by the house 2 days after I moved in. I heard her voice before I saw her. "Mama, I told you not to get involved in this." She was talking to my mother at the door. I was still upstairs, unpacking, or pretending to. Really, I was sitting on the bed, holding an old photo of us, me and Bray at her high school graduation, both of us grinning like we had the world in our hands. When I heard her footsteps in the hallway, my body stiffened, and then there she was, standing in my doorway, arms crossed like a shield, eyebrows drawn tight. "Hey," I said, like I was trying out the word, soft, careful. She didn't return it. She just looked me over, like I was something she didn't know what to do with, like a stranger who used to be her mother. "You really came back here?" she asked. I nodded. I didn't have anywhere else to go. She glanced around the room, scoffing. "So now what? You just pretend none of it happened?" "No," I said. "Nothing about this is pretend." She leaned against the doorframe, tight in the jaw. She looked so much like me at that age it hurt. Same strong cheekbones, same sharp stare. But her softness, the part I'd held in my arms, was buried under years of resentment. "Darius doesn't want you around the kids," she said bluntly. "He thinks it's confusing for them." Ah, there it was. The first blow. I had barely seen my grandbaby since the divorce. Little Zion, 6, with his curious eyes. Micah, 3, who barely remembered me at all. I had bought Micah a book for his birthday. It was still in my bag, unopened. "They're my grandsons," I said carefully. "I just want to see them. I'm not here to make things harder." She shook her head. "You always make things harder. That's the problem. You create storms and act surprised when the rain comes." That one cut deep. Not because it was clever, because it was rehearsed, like she'd been waiting to say it. I swallowed hard. "I made mistakes, Bray. I know that. But I never stopped loving you. I never will." Her face didn't soften. "You loved me," she said, "but you didn't show up. You let things fall apart. You let yourself fall apart." I opened my mouth to explain, to tell her about the late nights, The panic attacks, the debt, the silence in my marriage that turned into screaming, but I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, because I knew it wouldn't matter. Pain changes people, turns daughters into critics, turns mothers into cautionary tales. I'm not here to ask for anything, I said. I'm just trying to put myself back together. That's all. She stared at me a moment longer, and then, with a small shrug, she said, "Do what you want. Just don't expect me to be part of it." And she left. No hug, no goodbye, just her scent in the hallway, cocoa butter and edge control, and the echo of shoes on wood. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Mama was sweeping the porch, slow, rhythmic, like she'd been doing it forever. I watched her, watched the way she didn't look up when Braylon walked past her, head high, keys jingling in hand. Mama didn't speak. She just kept sweeping. She knew. She always knew when to let the dust settle on its own. That night, I took Micah's book from my bag and wrote something on the inside cover. For Micah. "One day, I hope you read this and know that I never stopped trying, even when they stopped believing in me." I closed the book, placed it on the nightstand, and whispered to myself, just above a breath, "Keep going." Some moments leave bruises on the soul, not from what was said, but from who didn't say anything. It was a year ago, a dinner party. Jonas, my now ex-husband, had just gotten a promotion at the bank. Braylon insisted we host something at the house, just close friends and family. She called it a small celebration. I called it a performance. The table was full, roasted salmon, rice and peas, wine flowing like it was earned. Darius brought cigars, even though nobody smoked. Reba showed up late, in a tight green dress and gold heels that clicked louder than her laugh. She always knew how to make an entrance. At first it was easy to smile. I played the part, the loyal wife, the gracious host, the proud mother. I served plates with a steady hand even though my insides were shaking, because what no one at that table knew, or pretended not to know, was that we were broke. Our savings were gone. The bills were stacked in the drawer behind the microwave. Jonas had racked up debt I didn't know about until the collector started calling my cell. We were drowning, and I was the only one trying to swim. But at that table, with wine in their hands and smiles on their lips, nobody wanted the truth. They wanted the image, the illusion. And then, like all fragile things, it cracked. It was Reba who asked the question. "So, Mari, still doing your little candle business?" I froze for a second. My candle business. The one thing I'd built with my own hands, in the middle of chaos. I had shut it down months before. No money for supplies, no time, no energy. But her tone was sharp, playful, too loud, the kind of question that came with an audience. I opened my mouth to answer, but Jonas beat me to it. She had to shut that down. "Let's just say it wasn't exactly profitable," he said, smirking as he sipped his wine. Laughter broke out across the table, light at first, then louder. Even Braylon chuckled. Even Reba, who was supposed to be my friend, leaned into Darius and whispered something behind her hand. And I sat there, still, swallowing every part of me that wanted to scream, every piece of me that wanted to say, "I've been keeping this family afloat while you sip wine and throw shade. I've been selling candles at street markets just to pay for your daughter's damn ballet classes. You don't get to laugh at me, not when I'm the only one telling the truth." But I didn't say any of that. I smiled. I made a joke. I poured more wine. And later that night, I cried on the bathroom floor with a towel in my mouth so no one would hear. Reba knocked once, lightly, then walked away. She never came in. That was the night I realized something I never wanted to believe. They didn't see me, not as a woman, not as a mother, not as a friend. They saw what they needed from me, comfort, convenience, a backdrop to their own performance. But when I started to fall, when I stopped playing the role, they looked away. And now, back in Mama's house, I remembered every face at that table, every laugh, every silence. I stood in the kitchen the next morning, holding a candle I had found in one of my old boxes. Vanilla and cedar, one of my first blends. The label was crooked, handwritten, a little smudged, but it was mine. I lit it slowly, watched the flame catch, watched it burn steady, and I whispered, "They don't get to define me anymore." Then I took out a notebook from the drawer, opened to a clean page, and wrote one sentence. "Start again, but this time, for you." Healing didn't arrive like a sunrise. There was no dramatic light, no music swelling. It came in whispers, in the way I swept the kitchen floor before Mama woke up, or how I rearranged the spices in alphabetical order like I used to do when I was little. It was quiet work, unnoticed work, but it was mine. On the fourth morning back, I stood barefoot in the backyard garden, dew still clinging to the grass. Mama's collards were growing wild, her tomatoes stubborn and leaning. The soil smelled like something honest, earthy, real, a smell you can't fake. I knelt beside the rosemary bush and just breathed. I hadn't felt that kind of stillness in years. For the first time since everything fell apart, my hands weren't shaking, my heart wasn't racing, my mind wasn't cycling through shame like a washing machine stuck on spin. Just rosemary, just soil, just breath. Mama came out onto the porch and saw me there, knees in the dirt, fingernails already dark. "You always did like the garden," she said. I looked up at her. It liked me back. She nodded once, then went back inside without another word. That was our rhythm now. Small gestures instead of big conversations. I think she knew I didn't need advice. I needed space, stillness, a place where no one was measuring my worth by how put together I looked. That afternoon I cleaned the front steps, not because anyone asked me to, just because they were dusty and I needed something to do that didn't involve regret. Later, I took the curtains down from my bedroom and washed them. Let the light in for the first time since I'd arrived. I hung a photo of Braylon on the wall. Just her when she was 8, missing a front tooth, wearing a pink tutu, and holding a jelly sandwich with pride. I didn't hang it because I missed her. I hung it because I needed to remember who we were, before the pride, before the distance, before the coldness hardened us both. In the evenings, I started writing again. Not a journal, not letters, just little sentences, quiet thoughts. Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I've just been carrying too much alone. Shame is a liar with a loud voice. I am still here. Each night, I'd place the paper under my pillow, like a child hiding prayers. I didn't know what I was building. I just knew I had to keep my hands moving. And slowly my movements became ritual, sacred. Water the plants, wipe the counters, make the cornbread the way Mama taught me. Not the boxed kind, but real, thick and golden. Fold the towels with care, not because anyone would notice, but because I was starting to remember I was worth doing things well for. One night, Mama sat across from me at dinner, her eyes low on her plate. After a long stretch of silence, she said, "You look lighter." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. "Sometimes," she said, not looking at me, "we forget that the slow days matter just as much as the big ones." And then she passed me the hot sauce like we were any two women just sharing a meal, not a mother and a daughter trying to remember how to be close without hurting. I smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks, not because anything was fixed, but because for the first time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own skin. That night, I wrote just one sentence. "The world may not notice me, but I see myself now." And for that night, it was enough. I wasn't expecting to see them. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind of heavy, humid day where the air feels thick enough to bite. I was in the living room folding towels and humming without realizing it. A little bit of Donny Hathaway slipping out of me like muscle memory. Then I heard it. The back door creaked. Small feet, fast steps. A giggle. My breath caught in my throat. And there they were. Zion 6, tall for his age with those thoughtful dark eyes that always looked like they were taking notes on the world. And Micah, just 3, chubby wrists and juice on his t-shirt, hair in soft coils. They stood there like 2 deer in a clearing, unsure, curious. Braylon hadn't called, hadn't said they'd be stopping by. She probably assumed Mama would be the one watching them, not me. Zion tilted his head. "Grandma Mari?" It had been over a year since he called me that. My heart cracked and bloomed all at once. I nodded. "Hey, baby." He looked at me cautious. Not scared, just studying. Kids don't fake affection the way adults do. They don't dress up their discomfort. They either lean in or step back. Micah stepped forward first. No words. Just walked up and placed a half-eaten graham cracker in my hand like it was a gift. Then climbed onto the couch like it belonged to him. Zion followed, still quiet, sitting beside me, legs swinging. We sat there for a moment. No explanations, no forced smiles, just presence. "You smell like Mama's house," Zion said finally. I smiled. "That's because this used to be my house too." Micah pointed to a photo on the wall, the one of Braylon in the pink tutu. "Is that Mommy?" I nodded. "She looked funny." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Not loud, not bitter, just soft and full. They didn't ask why I was there. They didn't ask where I'd been. They didn't care that the adults whispered around me or that Darius didn't want me around. All they saw was someone who loved them. And that was enough. Zion reached for a book from the old crate by the TV. One of the ones I used to read to Bray when she was little. Corduroy. "Will you read it?" he asked, holding it out. I blinked fast. My hands were shaking. "I'd love to," I said. I opened the cover, worn, pages soft with time, and started reading. Micah curled up against my side, sticky fingers on my arm. Zion rested his chin on my shoulder. I read slowly, my voice steady, letting the words land soft and safe. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, belonging. Not because I had earned it, not because someone forgave me, but because these boys, too young to lie, too innocent to hold grudges, reminded me what love looks like before it gets filtered through resentment and ego. They didn't look away from me, and for a woman who had been invisible for so long, that meant everything. When Braylon came to pick them up, she barely looked at me. Just clipped, "Come on, boys," and held the door open. Micah waved. "Bye, Grandma Mary." Zion didn't say anything, but as he walked past, he slipped something into my hand. It was a crayon drawing, messy, bright. It was me, standing in front of the house, smiling. I bit my lip, holding back tears. Looked down at the paper like it was a lifeline. He had written something at the bottom, crooked letters, barely legible. "You can come back." It wasn't just a child's scrawl. It was a truth I didn't know I needed. Maybe they couldn't give me my old life back, but maybe I was still allowed to build a new one. Starting here, starting small, starting with the ones who didn't look away. The house was beginning to feel different. Not because the furniture changed or because anything big had happened, but because I had started to touch things again. Not like a guest, not like I was passing through, but like someone who belonged. I cleared the back porch and swept it every morning. I repotted Mama's peace lilies, gave the kitchen cabinets a deep clean, wiped the baseboards even though nobody would notice. I started making cornbread every Saturday, no one asked for it, but by the third week, Mama stopped eating breakfast on Fridays. She was saving room. That was her way of saying, I see you. Small things were growing, the kind of things people overlook when they only value what makes noise. And that's when Darius showed up. I was in the front yard, pruning the hydrangeas near the gate, sweat on my brow and a small cut on my thumb from a thorn I didn't see coming. I heard the engine first, then the slam of a car door. I looked up. There he was, standing in that pressed white polo, sunglasses pushed up on his head, gold chain glinting in the sun. Didn't expect to see you working out here, he said. I stood slowly, wiping my hands on my jeans. Didn't expect to see you either. He smirked, like my presence was a joke, like the idea of me doing anything worthwhile didn't compute. Braylon asked me to grab a few things from Mama Evelyn, he said, looking past me toward the porch. Didn't realize you'd moved in. I didn't answer. He shifted his weight, eyes scanning the freshly trimmed hedges. Y'all been busy? I nodded. Just keeping things clean. Right, he said, lips tightening. Well, that's good. We all gotta earn our keep somehow, huh? There it was. The dig, casual, calculated, like I was a stray dog they'd let inside, temporarily, out of pity. I kept my voice steady. You can tell Braylon I'm not in the way. He chuckled, dry. I'll let her know, but you know how she feels about all this? He took a few steps closer, voice lowering like we were about to share a secret. She's doing well, you know. We're stable. Kids are great. They've got structure. I tilted my head. That's so? He nodded. What they don't need is confusion. Ah, confusion. That's what they were calling me now. I'm not trying to confuse anyone, I said. I'm just here, living, helping my mother. He smiled. That tight, polite kind of smile you wear when you want someone to feel small without saying it out loud. Sure, he said. Just remember whose space you're in. And then he turned toward the porch. But before he stepped away, I said it, not loud but clear. This is still my mother's house, and if you ever forget that, I'll remind you. He stopped, looked back at me surprised. Not because I'd yelled, not because I'd threatened, but because I'd said it without flinching. He gave a little shrug as if brushing me off. Just don't make things harder than they need to be. I let him walk away. Didn't argue, didn't defend myself, because I didn't need to. I turned back to the hydrangeas, picked up my shears, and kept trimming. Behind me, I heard the screen door creak open. Mama's voice floated out, soft and dry. He's lucky you're not your grandmother's daughter. She would have met him at the gate with a broom. I smiled. I thought about it. She laughed from the doorway, then disappeared back inside. That night, I lit another one of my old candles, lavender and mint, and sat by the open window. I wrote something new on a torn envelope. They think silence is surrender, but sometimes it's just roots growing underground. I folded the note and slipped it into my journal, and I slept well. Because while Darius tried to flex in a house that wasn't his, I was rebuilding mine from the inside out. It was raining that afternoon, soft and steady, like the house was being washed of something. I was in Mama's bedroom, helping her look for a set of earrings she claimed had been stolen, though I suspected they were just buried somewhere between old church programs and Avon catalogs from the 90s. Try the tall dresser, she said, waving her hand from the kitchen. Top drawer, might be in there. I pulled it open and froze, not because of the earrings, but because of what I saw beneath an old silk scarf, a bundle of envelopes tied with a faded red ribbon. They weren't labeled, but I could feel the weight of them. I sat down on the edge of the bed and untied the ribbon. Carefully, slowly, like I was unwrapping something sacred. They were letters. written in my mother's handwriting, neat, sharp, controlled, not addressed to anyone, just entries, thoughts, some dated as far back as 1982. One of them caught my eye, July 14th, 1997. She's leaving in the morning, 19 years old and more sure of herself than I've ever been. I should be proud, but I'm terrified. I saw the bruise on her arm. She didn't think I noticed. She said Jonas is just stressed. I said nothing, because I didn't know how to say, don't go, because no one ever said it to me when they should have. I stopped reading. My throat tightened. My stomach turned. Mama knew, she knew, even back then, that something wasn't right, that I was walking into something that might break me, and she didn't stop me. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to ask her why she let me go, why she watched me leave that morning in my Sunday best with a smile painted over fear. But then I kept reading. I tell myself it's her life, that she has to make her own choices, but truth is, I was scared she'd hate me if I told her the truth. And worse, that she'd go anyway. So I made her cornbread that morning, packed her bag, smiled, and stood at the door like my mother did for me, silent and proud. But my heart begged her to stay. I folded the letter slowly, gently. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt seen in a strange, sad, beautiful way. Like for the first time, I understood the silence between us wasn't emptiness. It was love, heavy and unspeakable. A love passed down from women who had been told over and over to be strong instead of soft. Mama hadn't failed me. She had just been raised in the same silence I was trying to break. Later that night, I found her in the kitchen stirring greens with her back to me. "I found your letters," I said. She didn't turn around, just kept stirring. "Did you read them?" "Just one," I said. "The one from 97. Still no reply. "I didn't know you saw the bruise," I said softly. "I saw a lot of things," she said. "Then why didn't you stop me?" She finally turned to face me. Her eyes weren't angry, just tired and full, because I knew you wouldn't listen, and because I remember what it felt like, to leave and think you knew better than the women who raised you. She sat down, pulled out a chair for me. We didn't cry. We didn't hug. But something passed between us. Something thick and old, like forgiveness, not the kind you ask for, the kind you inherit. She reached across the table and took my hand. "You stayed too long," she said, "but you came back." I nodded. "I think I had to fall apart to come back whole." She looked at me then, really looked, and said, "You're stronger than I ever was." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. That night I wrote, "Our mothers do the best they can with what they've been given. Sometimes love doesn't speak. Sometimes it just stays." It started with a box in the closet, one I had sealed 3 apartments ago. One I told myself I'd throw out every time I moved, but I never did. Inside were wicks, molds, half-used jars of soy wax, a few essential oils, lavender, eucalyptus, cedarwood, and a single label that still had my handwriting on it. Ellis & Co. The logo was cheap. The sticker was peeling. But when I held it in my hands, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Ownership, not the legal kind. Not the put your name on the lease kind. The kind that says, "This came from me, this is mine." That night, while Mama was at Bible study and the house was quiet, I set everything up on the kitchen counter. I melted wax slowly, stirring like prayer, added eucalyptus and lemon zest, a scent I hadn't made in years, one that reminded me of clarity, clean beginnings, the kind of smell that makes people close their eyes without meaning to. I poured it into a glass jar and waited. No labels, no social media, no pitches, just flame, wax, and memory. When it hardened, I lit it and cried. Not because I was sad, because I finally remembered what it felt like to make something that didn't need anyone's permission to exist. 2 weeks later, I had 10 candles, then 20. I started waking up early before the sun to work. The kitchen became my lab again. Mama didn't ask questions, just brewed her coffee and watched me with that knowing look. One morning while we were having toast, she said, "You know the Juneteenth festival's coming up?" I nodded. "They always have a vendor table open last minute." I looked at her. "You think anyone would want my candles?" She didn't blink. "I do." That was enough. I signed up the next day, paid the $25 fee with shaky hands, dressed up my old jars with twine and fresh labels, handwritten, because I didn't trust a printer to do it better than my own pen. I called the new line Second Fire. No logo, no frills, just the name and the scent, because sometimes the second fire burns stronger than the first. The morning of the festival, I showed up early. Mama came with me, wearing her straw hat and her black Don't Crack t-shirt. She brought folding chairs and a little sign she made herself. "Support local, Ellis Candles." I laughed when I saw it. It was crooked and perfect. By noon, people were stopping by. A woman named Tanya said the cedar and lavender blend smelled like her grandmother's porch. A young couple bought 2 for their first apartment. A high school student asked if I ever taught workshops. And in the middle of it all, as if the universe couldn't help itself, Reba showed up. Gold hoops, nails sharp, smile flat. She stood across from my table, arms crossed. "Mari," she said, voice all teeth. "Reba," I replied, calm. She picked up a candle, turned it over like it offended her. "You back at it, huh?" "Yes, I am." She looked at me, not like a friend, not like an enemy, like a woman confused about how someone she left behind managed to climb back up without asking for help. "Well," she said slowly, "you always were stubborn. I prefer resilient." She nodded once, placed the candle down, and walked away. No scene, no insults, just the quiet ache of someone who expected me to stay broken. I watched her leave without flinching, because I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just living. That night, after we packed everything up, I'd sold 17 candles. Mama and I sat on the porch, sipping lemonade from red plastic cups like it was champagne. "You did good," she said. "I feel good," I replied. Not proud, not flashy, just full. Full in a way I hadn't felt in years. I went upstairs, lit one of the last candles from the batch, and sat by the window. The flame flickered gently. No drama, no noise, just steady light. I opened my notebook and wrote, "They don't have to believe in me. I believe in me, and I am enough." It was a Saturday afternoon when the phone rang. Mama picked up in the kitchen. I was on the porch, trimming mint leaves for a new batch of candles. The sun was warm and my hands smelled like summer. Her voice through the screen door was low, then sharp. "Mari, it's Braylon." I wiped my hands and came inside. She held the phone out like it was something fragile. "She don't sound right." I pressed it to my ear. "Bray?" Static, then breathing. "Micah's running a fever," she said, voice thin. "Darius is working. I can't get him to hold anything down. I didn't know who else to call." There was no softness, no apology, just panic. "I'll be right there," I said. When I arrived, Braylon didn't meet me at the door. I let myself in. The house was tense, the kind of tension you don't see, but feel in your shoulders. Micah was on the couch, cheeks flushed, eyes glassy. He let out a soft whimper, clutching his favorite stuffed elephant. Zion sat nearby, wide-eyed and quiet. He didn't say a word, just watched me like he was waiting for permission to hope. Braylon stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, jaw tight. I gave him Tylenol, she said, but he threw it up. I think he's getting worse. I nodded, walked straight to Micah, sat beside him, felt his forehead, hot, damp. He needs fluids, I said calmly. Pedialyte if you have it, popsicles if not. She moved to the freezer without a word. I leaned close to Micah, brushing the curls from his forehead. You remember Grandma Mari's voice? I whispered. He blinked, barely. A little nod. You're gonna be okay, baby. I'm here. I stayed with him, got him to sip water slowly, wiped his face, held him when he dozed. Braylon stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. It was the longest silence we'd ever shared. Finally, she said, You're good with them. I didn't look at her, just kept stroking Micah's back. They're good kids. Another pause, then, You used to look at me like that, you know, when I was sick. I turned to her now, met her eyes. You were my whole world, I said. Still are. Her face didn't change, but her voice did. Sometimes I forget how young you were, when you had me. I always thought you were supposed to know everything. I didn't, I said. You still don't. Nope. She laughed, just a little, the kind that comes out like a cough, quick and unsure. I didn't want to call you, she admitted, but I didn't know who else would come this fast. You don't have to want to, I said. I came anyway. She sat down across from me, tired, still guarded. I've been angry at you for so long. I don't even remember when it started. I know. I kept waiting for you to say something that would fix it, but nothing ever sounded right. I wasn't trying to fix it anymore, I said. I was just trying to live with it. We sat there, not saying anything else, just breathing in the weight of years we never unpacked. Eventually, Micah stirred and asked for water. I gave it to him. He kept it down, small victory. Braylon stood up, walked to the window and said, You want to stay a while, until he feels better? I'll stay as long as he needs. She turned to face me. Her expression was unreadable, but she didn't say no. That was enough. Later that night, back at Mama's, I sat in my old room, the smell of peppermint candles still lingering from earlier. I opened my notebook and wrote, She didn't forgive me, but she called, and maybe that's where healing begins. Not in the apology, but in the reaching out. I woke up on a Tuesday and knew. Not because something dramatic happened, not because anyone apologized, not because the pain was gone. I just knew. I had stayed long enough to remember who I was before I bent myself to fit into their stories. Long enough to see that the house that raised me wasn't a waiting room for redemption. Long enough to stop hoping they'd give me something they didn't know how to offer. It wasn't about leaving them behind. It was about stepping forward without waiting for their blessing. Mama was on the porch drinking her coffee when I sat beside her, barefoot and clear. I'm moving out, I said. She didn't flinch, just nodded slowly. Where to? Don't know yet. Got a lead on a room over on Belmont. It's small, but the light's good. She sipped her coffee. You sure? No, I said, but I'm ready. She looked at me then, long and steady, like she was measuring not just my words, but the woman behind them. You came back standing, she said, but now you're leaving standing taller. That was all. No tearful goodbye, no sermon, just truce, and two strong women sharing a quiet morning before everything changed. I packed what little I had, my notebooks, my candles, a small box of childhood photos, the crayon drawing Zion gave me. Braylon didn't come by. Reba never called. Darius wouldn't have noticed if the earth tilted sideways. But I didn't leave for them. I left for the woman who sat on the bathroom floor a year ago with a towel in her mouth so no one would hear her cry. For the woman who believed silence was survival. For the girl who packed a suitcase at 19 and walked straight into a life that broke her. And most of all, I left for the woman who walked back into that same house at 45 and refused to stay broken. Before I closed the door, I left something on the table, one of my candles. The label read, Return, Lavender. Rosemary. Truth. I didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye. Because when you finally choose yourself, the goodbye is already understood. The new place was small, no yard, one window, a tiny kitchen with a humming fridge, but it was mine. I laid out my tools on the counter. Wax, oils, wicks. Lit a new candle, opened the window, let the world in. That night I wrote in my journal. They didn't clap, they didn't cry, they didn't chase me. But I left on my own terms, and sometimes that's the loudest revenge of all. And that's how I began again. Not rescued, not redeemed, just free. I used to think that healing looked like applause, like people circling back with tears in their eyes and saying, "You were right, we were wrong." I waited years for that moment, but it never came. And now I understand. It was never supposed to. Healing didn't come from their regret. It came from my own permission to exist, to take up space, to stop performing pain just to be believed. Sometimes the only justice you will ever get is living well. Not loudly, not for show, just, well, sleeping with peace instead of shame, walking into rooms without shrinking, creating something with your own hands that didn't exist before you touched it, saying no without guilt, saying yes without fear. They still don't know everything I went through. They probably never will. And maybe that's okay. Because my story doesn't need to be understood to be valid. My scars don't need their recognition to be real. My strength doesn't need a witness to exist. If you've ever been pushed aside, made to feel small, forgotten by the very people who said they loved you, I want you to hear me now. You don't have to wait for their approval to come back to yourself. Come home. Even if home is just a quiet room with one window and a soft flame. Come home to you. That's what I did, and it changed everything.